Good morning, it's Shanna. Today we're going to talk about whether or not you are too old or if I am too old for witchcraft. I think you can ask that question whether you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and beyond. And I wanted to discuss why witchcraft isn't about age, it's about the wisdom and growth and personal power during any of those stages. So while we discuss, I just thought I would flip through the Herb Crafters because this is kind of my wise elder deck, I guess. It's not necessarily how I use it specifically, but I figured it was a good deck to explore while we chat. And then towards the end of the video, I will share a spread and go from there. Okay, so where do I want to start? I think for people who aren't part of the witchcraft community, I think there's a preconceived notion that witchcraft is either for angsty teens or old women going through some kind of midlife crisis, right? And I think these stereotypes can paint witchcraft as an escape for people with overactive imaginations. I think people assume that witchcraft is for people who have been through trauma, And while that may be the case for some, and obviously there's nothing wrong with that, I don't think that's where a lot of us are coming from. Witchcraft, in my opinion, is actually one of the most grounding, practical, spiritual practices that I can engage in without feeling like I'm participating in like an organized religion. And coming back to that, angsty teen or being here because of trauma, which again, I don't necessarily think is the case for most people. I think it's more about engaging with reality in a deeper, more intentional way. When we can acknowledge that witchcraft and a magical practice of any type, it is engaging with ourselves in a deeper way, we're able to acknowledge the fact that with age comes wisdom. And I feel like that's kind of a cliched concept, but I think anyone who is aging, who's aged beyond, say, I don't know. I think any age you start to realize, like, the older you get, the more you know. I mean, that's just obvious, but I think you start to understand what that actually means as you get older. And I think it's not necessarily just wisdom, it's that you've experienced more, right? You've made big purchases, you've made big life decisions, you've been through heartache, you've earned the right to practice witchcraft without explaining or apologizing to anyone. And I think when we come to witchcraft, whatever that means for you, whatever that means, I mean, it's going to look different for everyone, I think. If you're coming at it in your 20s, I think it can be about discovering who you are beyond social expectations. I think there's a lot of expectations for every age, whether it's because of media, religion, family expectations. I think there are certain milestones that we're expected to meet. And I think witchcraft can kind of help us expand out of those areas, not necessarily move away from, because I think a lot of them are integral parts of life, right? But I think being able to expand upon those and allowing our roots to sort of reach outside of those boundaries helps you build a foundation. I think your personal ethics, your relationship with your intuition, your understanding of energy work, it's all part of experimenting with different traditions and finding what resonates. And I think that's such an important step that I think, in my opinion, can potentially get overlooked when we're coming at witchcraft from like a social media perspective. I know that there's been certain things that I have that I sort of thought would happen or that I expected of myself coming, back into it, that really isn't helpful. Not that it's not helpful for someone else necessarily, but we all kind of have to figure out our own path, which such a gross thing to say, like figure out your own path. Ooh. But it's true. Like you have to figure out what works, Does spell work for you? Does candle magic work for you? Does prayer work for you? I mean, there's all kinds of different things, and we just have to kind of figure out what it is. And I think, in my very humble opinion, that social media is a great place to learn what works for us, right? Like if we see something and we like it and we try it and it works, then we figure out how to incorporate it into our practice. That's just how it works. If we don't like it, then we either modify it or we just don't do it again. And I think if you're coming at witchcraft during your 20s, I think those pieces are a natural stepping stone into progression of your own practice. I think if you come into witchcraft in your 30s, it can be really interesting, and not even necessarily coming into witchcraft, but whether or not you step into it in your 30s or you progress from your 20s into your 30s, I think you're able to integrate your practice better and with more confidence into your daily life. I think you can use witchcraft for career magic, working on your relationships, parenting with intention. I think there's all kinds of, new milestones that we hit in our 30s, sometimes for some of us, that we can then continue to build upon within our witchcraft practice. And I feel like in our 30s, we have enough life experience at that point to know what works and what doesn't, generally speaking. And I don't think saying like, oh, now I know what works and what doesn't, and so from now on, these are the things I'll do and those are the things I won't. Because obviously, witchcraft is ever changing, and I think, especially as we age, things will work differently. Something that maybe didn't work for us in our 20s might suddenly be like the best thing that we can do for ourselves in our 40s or 50s or beyond. I think in our 40s, that is sort of the time where we sort of really start to hit our stride. You've probably weathered some storms, you've celebrated victories, you understand kind of the long game, or if you don't completely understand it, you kind of have a better idea of what's happening with you and for your life. Like I feel like you've kind of started to form this. I kind of look at it like working with clay. Like, in your 20s, that's when you're just sort of rolling that ball. You're kind of figuring out like the feel of it. You're warming it up. You're getting ideas. In your 30s, maybe you're starting to play with the clay. Maybe you flatten it a little bit, stretch it out. Maybe you kind of start to get an idea, and maybe you start to kind of flex around with the clay. And you play with multiple ideas. You haven't really quite formed anything yet, but you're playing with it. You're working with it, and those ideas are formulating. When you're in your 40s, I feel like you've put the clay down and you've gone out and bought yourself some tools, some clay tools. Obviously, I'm not an artist. There's probably a name for them. I don't know what clay tools are called. We're just going to call them clay tools. But I feel now at this point, now you've got a desk set up and you've got a mat for your clay and you've got like sculpting tools and cutting tools and things that can score designs on the clay. Now you're really starting to formulate a solid idea. Maybe you've taken notes, you've sketched out a plan. That's where I feel like you kind of are in your 40s. And your practice becomes less about what you can get and more about what you're becoming. And I think that's a key part of witchcraft. I think it starts to become more of a internal practice versus an external practice. At least that's how it is in my experience. Obviously, I really didn't practice in my in my 30s at all. And my 20s, literally, it was just that ball of clay. I had very little time to really like explore that before I decided to put it away. And so when I came back to it, now in my 40s, I feel like I had a few steps that I had to catch up to. But really being able to have the tools at my disposal and having the confidence, I think that's a big important part of this process as well, is gaining the confidence to just start, or just really like lean into whatever practice you were previously doing, and having the confidence to be like, yeah, this works, or no, it doesn't. I don't want to waste my time with this. I'm 49, so I'll turn 50 here in December. So, I'm kind of speaking ahead of myself here, but I feel like in my 50s, I feel like that might be where I really step into my true power as crone. I don't really consider myself crone energy. I'm not really in that crone stage yet. I still have one child. He's not really a child. He's 20. He's going to school, but I still have someone at home that, during the week, sometimes I still cook for. I'm still, hey, how was school? Did you remember to register for your classes? I'm still kind of performing those mom roles. And so I feel like I'm still kind of part of that mother stage. I haven't quite stepped into the crone. And I feel like maybe once he moves out, I might feel more like I can relate to the crone. But I think that once you've hit your 50s, you've lived through cycles of change, loss, rebirth. You understand on a cellular level, that everything is temporary. And that makes the magic that you practice incredibly potent. I just think things matter more. And the things that don't matter, I think it's easier to just let them go. Like, I don't need that. It's not something that is serving me. And so I'm letting it go. I think that witchcraft is particularly powerful for women as we age, because it's not just about crystals or candles. It's about reclaiming our power in a world that often tries to make women invisible as they age. At least that's been my experience. And that might be, well, obviously, not even might. That's an individual experience. And I wouldn't say that I'm necessarily invisible, but I will say, the latter part of my 40s, I have felt less relevant. The key to that has been, at least for me, I'm okay with that. I don't care if people don't see me in the same way that they saw me before as much. Like, let's be completely transparent here. Some days it's really hard. Some days I just feel really bad about it. Like, I don't like feeling dismissed. And because I am going through perimenopause, I have these bouts of like depression or, just very low moods, or sometimes I'm going to cry at the drop of a dime. The point being is that, I think we can start to feel a little transparent as we get older, but in a lot of ways, I think it's kind of nice because we don't have all of these external expectations put on us. We're not expected to be the prettiest, the hottest, the skinniest, the funniest. We're just not expected to be all of those things. And so we're able to kind of come back into ourselves a little bit more and really focus on what is important to us. And I think tarot is part of that process, because I think divination in general, tarot, runes, oracle, anything like that, it offers a new perspective on life's questions, right? I feel like we're able to dive deeper into them. We're able to explore them a little more, especially if we're journaling in addition to, as part of this practice. I just feel like we're able to really like come back to ourselves, who we were before all of these expectations were put on us. And I think that's why tarot and witchcraft can be so appealing to women as we get older. I think it's empowering when we're able to create a sacred space, when we're able to set intentions and work our magic in that space, whatever that space looks like. If it's in the closet, if it's on the other side of your bed, if it's at the park, wherever that space is for you, I think that can be very empowering to have that specific place where your magical energy is allowed to grow and develop. And I think being able to bring that power that we absorb with us into the outside world is extremely important, because I think, kind of coming back to, feeling irrelevant, I feel like the world in general, like the social world in general, is telling us constantly that our power is diminishing. We're less important. We're smaller. We're not as smart. We're not as powerful. And the reality is, it's the exact opposite, right? Like, we're getting more powerful. We know more. We are more experienced. We're more confident, generally speaking, hopefully. I'm trying to come back into that space of like embracing myself where I am, meeting myself where I am in this moment. And I've done pretty okay with that. Not every day or every moment, whatever, but generally speaking, I'm pretty okay with it. I have forgiveness for myself. These are the things that I'm just going through. I want to also talk about energy work, because I think we become more sensitive to energy, reading the room. I think our intuition becomes more in tune with what's going on around us. And I think we're better able to trust those feelings and trust that. I think witchcraft teaches us to manage our energy, protect our spaces, and work with the subtle changes that happen around us. I think we're better able to work with whatever it is that's coming at us constantly, especially, when we're out in the world, not necessarily in our own homes, but like at work, at the gym, at friends' house, at parties, whatever that is. I think we're better able to recognize that energy and know what to do with it, and be prepared before we get into that situation. I've mentioned it in passing a few times. Stuff is happening at work, and so I've been preparing myself before I go to work. Do I put on specific crystal bracelets? Do I put on specific oils? Do I put on specific earrings? Maybe I'm going to draw a rune somewhere on my wrist, and I go into those situations empowered and feeling empowered. Like, I'm giving myself goosebumps right now. I think we're better able to recognize what we need and how to protect ourselves when we go into these situations, whatever they are. I also wanted to talk about menopause or perimenopause as sort of an initiation into aging. Not necessarily an ending, right? I think a lot of people look at like not having our periods anymore as an ending to the first half of our life. But I think having a magical practice can help us lean into the idea of an initiation towards cronehood. Like, that's now you're stepping into, like, you're able to close that book or that chapter, however you want to kind of imagine that. For me, I feel like it's like a second, this is the second book. Once you hit that menopause age or phase, you're better able to put a close on that first book, wrap it up, make it pretty, put it on the shelf where you can look at it and enjoy it and visit it whenever you want. But now we're stepping into that second book. Now we get to start fresh. It's not the epilogue to our first book. It's a fresh new book, a fresh new experience, things we get to explore. And while a lot of times I struggle with that concept, I do try to embrace it regularly, because if we're not embracing the good parts, we're just going to make ourselves miserable. It just is what it is, because we can't change it, right? Like, you're going to get older. So you have to find ways to embrace that reality. And looking at witchcraft as an initiation into cronehood, I think is one way to do that. I also think that witchcraft can be a way, or it can be an act of rebellion in a way. Your voice, your wisdom, and I think something that we can keep in mind is that whether or not you believe in magic or the power that we all hold, I believe that we all hold that power, whether or not you utilize it or believe in it, I think it's there. And I think it's for us to use. And I think as we age, those of us who have a magical practice, a witchcraft practice, are better able to harness that power and put it to good use and form that clay into something that serves us. So I will touch briefly on tips for starting or deepening your practice, in my opinion. Obviously, that's why you're here, is to hear my opinion, so that's all this is. But if you sort of are in a place where maybe you're in a rut, or you feel stuck, or you're not really sure where to start or how to grow that magical practice, your witchcraft, lifestyle, I guess, if you will, I wanted to give 5 tips. So I've written them down. I'll try to remember to write them on the screen. Okay, so my tips are, number 1 is to start with what feels authentic. Don't feel pressured to adopt anyone else's practice for whatever it is. And I feel like that kind of comes back into the social media concept of, if you're not sure where to start or how to do it, do those things, do those social media things, whether it's whatever that looks like for you and who you're following, do those. And if it feels good, adopt it into your own, make it your own, or copy it outright. It's your practice. You're doing it at your house. Like, nobody's going to know if you're copying what, Witchcraft Tuesday does on Instagram. So do it if it feels good. I think the second tip then would be honor your experience. I think that kind of leads into what I just said. Understand when it feels good to continue doing it and to be confident enough to build upon it. I think that's a key as well, and I think journaling will help with that, because if you're writing down, this spell that you did, and you used a red candle and a wooden athame and 4 runes, but maybe it felt a little too intense. Maybe the next time you can come back to your journal and be like, okay, how can I make this feel less intense? And maybe a little more peaceful, a little more relaxed. Maybe you try a white candle. Honor that experience and allow yourself to try different things. I think people are afraid to try different things. And I think using your life experience, not necessarily just in witchcraft, but using your life experience to create your witchcraft practice. I also think simplifying, that's my 3rd tip. Keep it simple. I'm a huge proponent of keeping it simple, because if I get overwhelmed, I'm done. I'm out. I'll never come back to it. If I have to have 15, different herbs and 4 different colors of candle and, this specific crystal that's hard to find that you can only get in Africa, I'm not going to do it. Sometimes it can be just as simple as sitting quietly and saying, today I'm going to be protected from this energy, whatever that looks like. Obviously, you're going to elaborate a little bit more on that, but keep it simple. But you know what? Also, if simple is boring for you, be as elaborate as you want. Like, everyone's different. Again, it comes back to honor your experience. If you want a big, elaborate ritual, then do it. Do it. I think number 4 will be connecting with others. And I think YouTube is that for me, because I don't have anybody really who's witchy around me. So I don't really get to talk about it too much, although recently at work, it's come to everyone's attention that, I literally consider myself a witch. And so it's funny, the questions I get asked, and everyone's really nice and respectful, but it's funny. So in a way, I kind of connect with them on that level of, this is what I do. And which can be fun because sometimes I'm like, yeah, no, I do curse people. So watch out, you know? But I think connecting on here in a safe place of like witchcraft, tarot, finding your community, whether that means joining a coven or finding a club, a local club, finding, a group on Patreon or Discord, any of those places, Instagram, Facebook, if you're on Facebook. I think community is important because not only do we get support, but we get to ask questions. We can say, hey, I tried this spell and it didn't really work. Does anyone have any suggestions? Or there were, several months, about a couple years ago, where I was going to a tarot group and I was kind of going through something that I felt was magically related. And I reached out to one of the hosts, I guess, of that group and was like, hey, I think this thing's happening. This is what I think happened. I think this is why it's happening. And she was like, yeah, I think so too. Here's what you can do. And that was amazing. Like, I don't really have that. So community, I think, is important. And I think, not that this is at all related necessarily, but I think that's part of the draw of religion. Going to church, you have that community. You have people that you can talk about your feelings about that particular thing with. I think that's why clubs are so popular. It's why cults are so popular. And I'm not comparing witchcraft to cults. I'm just saying people like being around people because we want to talk about the things that interest us with other people. And then I think the last point I want to make is just trusting your intuition. And I think that sort of wraps into all the other things I've just said. Whether or not you know it, your intuition's been guiding you since day one. Now you just have to learn to listen to it and trust it. And now you're giving it a name. You're recognizing it. You're giving it the space to be what it is. So I guess the question of this video is, are you too old for witchcraft? And I say absolutely not. If anything, you're exactly the right age for it. Whatever age you are, witchcraft meets you where you are, and it helps you become who you're meant to be. And it helps you be better, the better person of who you currently are. So let's do the spread. I don't really have a ritual today. I know that, the other videos in this series have had a ritual, but again, I kind of wanted to keep it simple. I have kind of a busy day ahead and I didn't want to feel overwhelmed, but I wanted to do this video more than anything. So I do have this written down here as well. So this is a 3-card spread. And it's for embracing your magical path at any age, which obviously that's what we're talking about today. So let's go ahead and shuffle these and we'll get some cards. And you know what? This time I'm going to say, I always say this is kind of a generic reading. I'm going to make this a collective reading. So if you're watching and this resonates with you, you know the drill. If it doesn't resonate with you, you know the drill. Okay, so the 3 cards, the 3 positions are the wisdom you carry, your magical potential, and then breaking through limitations. So card 1. What life experience and inner knowing do you bring to your magical practice? I like to wait for jumpers. Just 1 card. All right, 3 of Earth. All right, card 2, your magical potential. What aspects of witchcraft are calling to you now at this stage of your life? Okay. Love that. Still good? Okay. And then the 3rd position is breaking through limitations. What beliefs about age, timing, or being too late are you ready to release? All right, we'll take the top card. Although my gut's telling me to take both of those, so we're going to use both of them. Card 1 is the wisdom you carry. What life experience and inner knowing do you bring to your magical practice? So let's go into the guidebook. I love this deck. I can use my intuition for this, absolutely, but I do enjoy the guidebook to this deck because there's little nuggets of wisdom in there that I generally find quite helpful. All right, go ahead and pause if you'd like. So the life experience, the Three of Earth, Three of Pentacles is, I think that kind of comes back to what I was talking about, community. I think you've learned that while not always necessary, it's helpful to have people around you to talk about your magical practice, your witchcraft practice, your tarot practice, whatever that is. And I think you are coming into the recognition that, yeah, you kind of need those external voices pulling you along through this process. So one of the things the book says is you have a responsibility to tend the abundance you've been given. And I think that leans into the idea that you're here practicing witchcraft for a reason. You owe it to yourself to explore that further. Even if that means, you get into it and you're just like, you know what, it's not for me. You owe yourself that courtesy of exploring what that means for you and what that looks like for you. This talks about teamwork, invite others to join you. This to me, that's kind of screaming like, join a club, join a coven, join a Facebook group, a Discord group. It's really leaning heavily into that group mentality. I don't know if mentality is the right word, but you know what I mean. It says approach people with clear expectations and agreements, and I think that goes both ways. Go into it with clear expectations for yourself, with clear boundaries for you and for others. So this talks about raspberry tea, energizes the body. And so one of the things I like about this book is it does talk about it talks about what's on the card and then also the meaning of the card. And so sometimes if it brings up something specific like raspberry tea, I'll make some raspberry tea for this reading, or, after this reading, that's how I'll wrap it up. And that's my magical practice for the day or for that moment, That's me doing something magical for myself. And it can be as simple as that. And then the very last line says, remember to enjoy the sweetness of life. Enjoy the process. Enjoy, practicing witchcraft. Enjoy reading tarot. Enjoy it. Find things that make you joyful in this practice. It doesn't have to be that serious. Okay, number 2, your magical potential. What aspects of witchcraft are calling to you now at this stage of your life? So 10 of air, 10 of swords, interesting. So this is alfalfa. Again, I'm going to go to the guidebook. 10 of air, pause if you'd like. So one of the first lines in the book says, compost your plans and allow new ideas to sprout. And I think that kind of falls in line with the 10 of swords, where it's not necessarily just about the finality of something, but also it's kind of that light at the end of the tunnel. You're in that new book at this point, or about to be in that new book, and being able to recognize that it's a fresh start. Replenish yourself and begin again is part, that says right here, replenish and begin again. I love that. It's just the finality of what it was and the beginning of what is about to be. So it does talk about this little tiny ladybug here. You want to see it up close? It says the ladybug is munching on aphids. So I think that leans into the idea that eliminating what doesn't serve you. Those aphids are, I don't know if you have flowers where aphids get on. I have roses, a lot of them, and I have to spray for aphids because there's not enough ladybugs to take care of them all. But eliminating all of the parasitic things that aren't serving you, the stuff that's weighing you down and keeping you from enjoying your practice. It says alfalfa is planted to restore worn out, degraded, and fallow land. So yeah, maybe your practice needs a refresh. The potential of refreshing and starting again and finding new things that bring you excitement. Maybe you've gotten to a point where you're just sort of like not feeling like what you've done is serving you anymore. And I like the idea of the scythe, because I feel like that might be pointing to a tool that you could potentially use for, bring into your witchcraft practice. You don't have to run out and buy a scythe. But if you have something similar, you have a small bowline or anything like that you feel can sort of banish or eliminate or clear out, that might be your invitation to start using that tool. And then the last line says, what you leave behind enriches new growth. So you're only going to, all of these experiences you've been through have led you to this point. And everything that you're going to experience from this point forward feeds into what comes next after that. All right, the moon is breaking through limitations. What beliefs about age, timing, or being too late are you ready to release? And I love that. And the 5 of air, the 5 of swords to me is definitely, I think, pointing to letting go of arguing with others about your practice, kind of leaning into the I don't give a shit anymore what other people think, letting go of that. And then the moon, what beliefs about age, timing, or being too late? I think the moon here is saying, despite the fact that society, whatever, might be telling you, or maybe you're feeling like it's too late, you're too old, you don't fit into that mold. The moon is saying, yeah, you do actually. All of that is just garbage. All of that is an illusion to keep you small, not allow that magical power to manifest itself within you. And I think you're ready to let that illusion go and fully embrace where you are in your magical practice. So let's pop open the book real quick here. I don't feel like I need the book on this one. This one to me speaks very clearly. All right, here's the guidebook for the moon. Let's see. Open your eyes to night blooming magic. Enter the luminous darkness, which I really like, fully embracing that unknown. Like, yeah, it's a little bit scary. It's a little bit confusing and maybe a little overwhelming, but trusting yourself that no matter how you feel as you step into this space, you're still going to be stepping into it. So you have to control how you're feeling about it. So this is the datura flower, and it says that they're unfolding from a compact bud into the open form of a chalice, which I love because I feel like this is I feel like this can embrace multiple things. Going from, maiden, mother, crone, it can be just rather than like a full spectrum of aging, it can be right now. Like, this is where you are right now. This doesn't necessarily have to be the maiden phase. This can be a full exploration and opening to who you are and who you're becoming, and really finding the beauty in that. It says intuitive awakening awaits, which to me is like, yay. I love it when I get messages like that. I love the validation that I am intuitive. I like hearing that I'm intuitive. I like getting that from an external source, because while I know I'm intuitive, it's nice to have the cards or someone else or whatever say, yeah, you are actually. This says, turn toward mystery with curiosity and courage. And I think that, again, it just leans into that trusting yourself, that intuition, being excited for these next phases of what is coming for you, being excited versus dreading it. I love this line. It says, stay awake and witness the magic that dwells in the darkness. Stop letting other people make you feel less than. Stay awake, open your eyes, embrace what it is that you have. And I love that message. That's so good. Okay, well, that is it for the spread. I do have some journal prompts. I will either I'll probably put them on the screen, or maybe I'll put a reminder to check the details below. Either way, they'll either be below or on the screen. But it's journal prompts to go along with this spread. I just didn't want to kind of like muddy the spread with, saying them out loud. So, and then lastly, I would ask if any part of this video resonated with you. Maybe did the spread resonate with you? Can you relate to this? You know, are you, and you don't have to be like someone who's going through perimenopause necessarily, though that is, you know, part of why I'm doing this video. But if you're in your 20s or your 30s, did any of this resonate with you? I'm always curious to hear if anything stood out to you. So with that, we are done for the week. Where are we at? Ooh, almost an hour until I edit. I'll probably be just under an hour. So I just want to say thank you one more time for everyone who stuck with me through the extremely long video collection series. I appreciate you. I love that you're here. I love all the comments. It was a ton of fun. It was super therapeutic for me to go through all of my decks. I just wanted to say thank you. I appreciate you guys being here, and I'm excited to see where the coming weeks take us. So with all of that being said, I will catch up with you guys then.